What's up, everybody? Today I want to tackle that 50-pound gorilla that's swimming around in the reef tank, and that is to quarantine or not to quarantine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do in my reef tank. So I recommend that you do your own research and come up with your own decision on whether you want to quarantine or not. First off, I quarantine every fish that I get. Now, I typically quarantine not because of ick, but first and foremost, I want to fatten up the fish before I release them into my display tank with a tank full of hungry other fish. The second reason that I quarantine, like I said, I don't quarantine because of ick, but I'm more worried about diseases such as brook, velvet, or Euronema. These are killers that will wipe out an entire tank in a week or less, so you definitely want to make sure you don't bring these in. I've experienced a wipeout my tank before, and ever since that happened, I've always quarantined basically to make sure I don't have these killers in my reef. So like I was saying earlier, quarantine is a decision that every reef keeper needs to make. Now, the only way to properly quarantine is to quarantine everything that's wet that may come into your tank. This means quarantining your fish, it means quarantining your corals, and it means quarantining your invertebrates. If you don't do all of those, you will always run the risk of bringing a disease into your tank. Now, fish, you want to quarantine anywhere from 1 month to some people quarantine up to 3 months. For corals, you want to do the 72 days to make sure it doesn't have any cysts on it that can bring ick or any other disease into your tank. Now, for invertebrates, you want to make sure that they don't bring anything in their exoskeletons or shells. So you need to determine how much time you want to do that. Depending on the fish, it really depends on how I quarantine. Most fish I'm going to quarantine in Seachem's product called cupramine. This is a copper treatment that will take out most of the diseases that fish have. Now, I normally quarantine for about 2 weeks in copper, and then I will do an observation period, and I will also do a couple of rounds of Prasi Pro to make sure they don't have any kind of worms. The other way I quarantine is by using tank transfer method. Now, I'm not as successful with tank transfer method as I would want to be, but that is one reason why I have the multiple 40 breeders in order to do tank transfer method as easy as possible. And it's real cheap to get these 40 breeder tanks. I've gotten a couple off of Craigslist, and I've also gotten them from the Petco dollar per gallon sale. So you don't have to spend an arm and a leg to build up your quarantine fish tanks. So that's how I do my quarantine. Like I said, I don't really worry about ick as much, but I do worry about those diseases that can completely wipe out a tank. Well, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you quarantine, and if you quarantine, how do you quarantine? Do you quarantine everything? Do you just quarantine fish? Let me know. I'm really interested to find out what the community does. As always, happy reefing. Talk to you guys later.